In Islam, dietary laws are outlined in the Quran and the Hadith sayings and actions of Prophet Muhammad. The foods that are prohibited haram for Muslims to consume are generally categorized as follows. Pork. The consumption of pork and its byproducts is strictly forbidden in Islam. This prohibition is clearly stated in the Quran in multiple verses, such as Surah Al-Baqarah Ra 173 and Surah Al-Ma'idah 53. Alcohol. Intoxicants, including alcohol, are prohibited in Islam. This prohibition is mentioned in several verses, such as Surah Al-Baqarah Ra 2-19 and Surah Al-Ma'idah 5-90-91. Carrion dead meat. Muslims are prohibited from consuming animals that have died of themselves carrion, as mentioned in Surah Al-Ma'idah 5-3. Blood. Consumption of blood is prohibited in Islam, as mentioned in Surah Al-Baqarah Ra 173. Animals slaughtered improperly. Muslims are only allowed to consume meat from animals that have been slaughtered in accordance with Islamic principles, known as halal slaughter. This involves pronouncing the name of Allah God at the time of slaughter and ensuring the animal is slaughtered swiftly with a sharp knife to minimize suffering. Animals dedicated to idols. Meat from animals that have been dedicated to idols or sacrificed in the name of anyone other than Allah is prohibited. Carnivorous animals and birds of prey. Meat from carnivorous animals and birds of prey is generally considered forbidden in Islam. Land animals without external ears. Some scholars interpret that animals without external ears, such as snakes and reptiles, are prohibited to consume. Insects. Most scholars agree that consuming insects is not permissible in Islam. Foods containing impurities. Any food that contains impurities, such as urine or feces, is considered haram. Food offered to other gods. Food that has been offered as a sacrifice to idols or other gods is prohibited for Muslims to consume. Fermented foods. Some scholars prohibit the consumption of foods that undergo fermentation, as they may contain alcohol as a byproduct of the fermentation process. Cross-contaminated foods. Foods that come into contact with haram substances during processing or preparation may be considered contaminated and therefore haram. For example, if utensils or cooking surfaces used for pork are not properly cleaned before preparing halal food, the halal food may become contaminated and haram. Food with unclear ingredients. If the ingredients of a food product are not clearly labeled and it's uncertain whether they contain haram substances, Muslims are generally advised to avoid consuming such products. It's important to note that interpretations of dietary laws may vary among different Islamic schools of thought and cultural practices. Some variations might exist in certain regions or communities, but the principles outlined above are generally agreed upon among Muslims worldwide. Food additives with haram origins. Some food additives or ingredients may have haram origins, such as certain colorings derived from insects or alcohol-based flavorings. Muslims are advised to avoid consuming foods containing such additives unless they are certain of their halal status. Meat from animals improperly slaughtered by people of the book. While Islam permits the consumption of meat slaughtered by people of the book, Jews and Christians, there are specific conditions that must be met for it to be considered halal. If these conditions are not met, the meat is considered haram for Muslims to consume.